Hi, so I'm Brendan, obviously. And this young lady right here in the yellow is Anise Butler. And here we have Anishka Morris. And so what we did was we're going to do a presentation on using citizen science to help protect an endangered shorebird. We did this in coordination with the International Piping Plover Census. That's the endangered shorebird that we're looking at. Okay, what I want to show you on this slide here, there are two subspecies. You have the subspecies that is dominant to the Great Lakes population and the Great Plains population, which is in Canada and the northern United States. That's what's in the purple circle. And then we have the Atlantic subspecies. We have our own subspecies, so we're kind of really special in the red, and that is on the coast of the U.S., like the southern coast of the U.S. And the blue represents the breeding range, and the yellow represents the winter range. And so what basically happens is our Atlantic subspecies usually comes down to the southern United States. You have Mexico, Cuba, and the Bahamas as well to winter. Okay, so the piping plover is wide-ranging and a sparsely distributed species. There are persistent and pervasive threats that affect it, as well as what we're doing now. We have labor-intensive protection activities in place. Okay, so some of the threats. One, you have recreation. In the Bahamas, tourism is our #1 industry. We try to make everything aesthetically pleasing for the tourists. We have to clear the beaches and make the sand all nice and pristine. That is actually detrimental to the piping plovers because their habitat is basically sandy flats and mud flats. You also have predation. Most of these, this is for the U.S., by the way. So predation in the U.S., they have the fox, but in the Bahamas, what we have feral cats and feral dogs. And so while we were out observing, we saw some tracks for some cats and dogs. Then you have off-road vehicles. These off-road vehicles can crush the nest of the piping plover as well as remove some of the rock that the birds use to make their nest. And then you have coastal development and shoreline stabilization. And basically, this introduces people to the beach as well as it can result in erosion of the bird's habitat.
To combat these issues, many areas in the breeding range of the piping plover's nest, researchers have been working diligently to assist the birds. In this photo, researchers and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service personnel have erected a wire enclosure around the piping plover nest, which allow the birds to move in and out, but prevents predators from getting in. In the year of 2011, researchers knew that the piping plovers wintered in Cuba and the Bahamas, but they weren't quite sure of the extent of which they used the Caribbean. In 2006, survey work was done in the Bahamas, and about 400 plovers were found. So in 2011, however, researchers surveyed the Bahamas archipelago and was astonished at the amount of plovers found there. So in 2011, the results have shown that there were 31 researchers from 10 different organizations that visited 176 sites in 14 islands of the Bahamas looking for this one bird, which is the piping plover. As a result, 1,077 piping plovers were found throughout the Bahamas in 2011, which is quite a significant find, resulting almost 20% of the Atlantic population, which is like the bulk of the birds were found on Andros, the Toote Keys, and the Berry Islands. Andros, for example, which represents 6% of the global population and 13% of the Atlantic coast population. Because this was like an astounding number in that year, the Toote Keys in North Andros became a national park to protect these endangered birds.
So what does this have to do with citizen science and research? Citizen science uses everyday persons to conduct and help researchers and scientists better understand species populations and the environment, And by doing this, we gained a lot of experience and knowledge about bird watching. So when Scott came to us and presented this idea, we had no knowledge of bird watching. I didn't know what piping plovers look like, and we had to gain some experience on how to use the equipment. So some mornings we would go out to South Beach when the tide got extremely low and you would be able to walk out almost like half a mile. And we observed birds using our binoculars, as seen in a few photos. And later on, we also got experience using a spotting scope. Birds that are far away, the spotting scope almost brings the animal in 80 times than the binoculars. So for the 2016 census, these survey locations were chosen based on the 2011 census because these spots showed a significant amount of piping plovers 5 years ago. So these spots were chosen again in hopes that we would have at least double the amount of piping plovers. In 2016, the preliminary numbers were more than 1,260 piping plovers.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the island that I visited, which was Abaco. And basically, we had 37 sites that were surveyed. 19 of those sites had piping plovers on them. In total, we found 176 piping plovers, which is, if any of you know the 2011 statistics, we had 76, so that's 100 new birds on Abaco. The most, right there, with 32 on Long Beach. That's where we found the most. What I really liked about this was I got the opportunity to go to the school and basically participate with the children there. Like, I think her name was Nikita, who presented on, she's from the Young Marine Explorers. Like she said, you need to get people involved. You cannot do behavioral change just off of awareness and education alone. You have to have them involved, and it's really good to get them from young. The cons of this whole experience for me would probably be that my feet look like butchered meat, but I have nice calves now, so from all of the walking. We covered about 40.6 miles of Abaco coast alone, and also what we did now is we did the marls, which in 2011 they weren't really able to do. So yes, that's Abaco.
In 2016, Anishka and I went to South Andros, just a few months ago, actually, last month. And in South Andros, we were there for a total of 9 days. However, we spent 6 days walking, and we walked over 20 miles. So we walked the entire coast of Andros, where everything's highlighted in yellow. And on the mainland alone, we found 52 piping plovers. And on the southern keys, the theory behind these keys was that we thought it would have been the same habitat and sand like the Jolter Keys, if any of you are familiar with it. Now it is a protected area. And so in 2011, there were a large number of piping plovers discovered there. So we figured, hey, let's try the southern keys because we assumed that it would have the same sand, same habitat like the Jolters. However, it didn't. There were a lot of marl and clay-like mud. It wasn't like the Jolters at all. But our 3 days on boat, we discovered 77 piping plovers, 5 of which were banded, and that is a banded one in the bottom picture. His number is K27, left leg, green tag.
So as Denise stated, over the course of our 9 days period, in South Andros, yeah, we did find 5 banded plovers. And what's interesting about it is, that the countries they were banded were in the U.S. and Canada. For instance, Prince Edward Island, which is in Canada. There was a survey conducted last year by the National Audubon Society. And what's interesting about it is when we visited the northern shore keys in South Andros, we found last year the two researchers that accompanied us, they found the same banded bird, K27, and we found it again this year in the same, well, not on the same key, but in the same location, and which, explain that these birds are visiting the same sites. Then we found birds that listed banded was North Brunswick, which is in Canada. They travel from New York, New Jersey, and North Carolina. Over the course of our 9 days period, Anishka and I, we had a lot of exposure, which was good. The picture above on the right will be Miss Tammy Pearl from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And she helped us a lot, in this experience. And the bottom left will be Mr. Mark Labar from the National Audubon Society. And we would like to thank everyone from the Bahamas National Trust, Mr. Scott Johnson, thank you so much, the College of Bahamas, Friends of the Environment, National Audubon Society, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Conservation Wildlife Society, and the Bahamian International Volunteers. Thank you very much.